kom er niet doorheen.
Heeft u de pagina al eens ververst?
Ja, een paar keer.
Wat is er, liefje?
En als u alles wegklikt en de boel weer even opnieuw opstart?
Ja, ook al gedaan.
Maar u komt er niet doorheen.
Nee, daarom bel ik. Hallo?
Ja, ik begrijp dat dit misschien een beetje een persoonlijke vraag is, maar zou het eventueel ook zo kunnen zijn dat u, ook echt een robot bent, zeg maar?
Nou, nee.
Laten we eerst even gaan zitten, Lara.
Dat weet u zeker?
Ik ben geen robot.
Mhm.
They carry on like nothing's changed.
For them, nothing has.
Dipanggil umsebenzi.
Litha. Ungathanda njani uhamba nami siyokubona umkhombe. Wekwenyani ke kodwa. Efika amadoda akhohlakeleyo ke apha Litha.
Ngoba
Ayimali.
They're coming for them, Kusi!
Musari uthora tipa ka bohaleng bonna Musari uthora tipa ka bohaleng bonna.
Let them try.
Police shot. Shots fired at the police. We need some more units over here. I'm a target. I got it.
he's gotta go. Yes. He's gotta go.
Matter of fact, you can turn the camera off. Just stay here. Just stay right here.
Right there. That was a marvel. You ain't no drug dealer, no gangbanging, everyday problem, man.
They just killed Snoop, man. He just lined me up, bro. He's laying in the street right now, man.
We're on camera, by the way. You know?
Oh. This is weird, because we can't.
Did you want to speak to the lieutenant or anybody?
She said cut him out. She said cut him out?
10-4, okay.
Hey everybody, I'm Steve Pond from TheWrap. Thank you for coming. Thank you for filling the place. That's great. It is my pleasure to introduce the filmmakers of our 3 short films. From I'm Not a Robot, director Victoria Warmerdam and producer Trent. From The Last Ranger, director Cindy Lee and producer Darwin Shaw. And from Incident, director and producer Bill Morrison. welcome everybody, and congratulations everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I think, I mean, basically, I want to start with the obvious question, which is what led you to make this movie? And you know, Victoria, for I'm Not a Robot, I have this picture in my head that you must have been doing CAPTCHA and failing, and somehow it clicked that maybe there was a movie in it. But tell me if I'm wrong.
Yes, exactly that. Yeah.
That saves an answer.
No, hello everyone. Thanks for sticking around. Yeah, I was trying to get through those captchas and I kept failing for like 4 or 5 times. And then I thought, oh, this might be a fun way to find out I'm a robot. And yeah, it's so frustrating, those captchas, you know. And, you know, it started as a funny thought, but then, you know, my imagination took a darker turn and I really started to wonder, okay, but what if, you know, I was, or not I, but the main character was bought by her partner. And I was really intrigued by this sort of Truman Show kind of aspects. Because for some reason I'm so scared that someday someone will tell me that the world is not what I thought it was. So this, you know, concept really ties into that. And I, you know, so I had the beginning of the film and then I immediately saw the ending of the film, which is quite dark. And then I thought, okay, how do we get from, you know, this mundane thing, you know, any other day at the office to this ending in like less than half an hour? So that was a fun challenge. Yeah.
So Trent, did you immediately say, yes, that's a great idea, let's do it?
Yeah, that's a short answer. Yes, I did. Because when she came up with this idea, I also, like she said, I also thought, oh yeah, that's really irritating, these captchas. I totally understand. And I like her absurd way of thinking. Like, yeah, who knows if there are people among us who are robots and who are indistinguishable from humans. You know, that's a very interesting thought. So immediately I was like, that's cool, let's do it. And I was also looking forward to the fact, because she did have the ending immediately in the beginning, and I was really looking forward, like, how is she gonna write from 0 to 100 in less than 30 minutes? I was really looking forward to that. So yeah, I really enjoyed it.
I mean, it feels like the kind of setup that could be played very light, and it could be the kind of setup for basically a horror movie. So how do you figure out, you know, where to hit on that spectrum, or where to start and where to end up?
It's part 2, the horror.
No, I think it was a very organic process because it started as a funny thought, and that's also how this film started. But when you really think about it, it becomes quite eerie. And my 2 previous sorts were like more comedy. And I wanted to challenge myself to, you know, dig into the drama and the sort of like the thriller vibe of it. But yeah, I think it came very natural because, you know, the whole like the dark comedy, that's just who I am as a human being. And yeah, I think it was, I don't know, I don't remember actually if I was like super conscious about like the tone of voice. Like that's just who I am. So it's hard to explain.
Yeah, it's always more difficult to explain it to others. For instance, in Europe, you have this wonderful support system. So you go with a script to your film fund, and then they support it or not. So that's wonderful. But to those people, you really have to explain, even if you write a script, is like, yeah, but it's this kind of tone, because it kind of goes from one tone to another tone, and
yeah,
that's
it
difficult.
mixes genres in a way. Yeah. So it's usually the challenge to write it in a way that other people understand what you're, you know, what you're doing, because it's always so funny how a written piece is such a different medium than a film. So it's funny that you have to sort of sell it in a different medium. So that's always the challenge when we are making a film. Like, okay, how do we nail that tone on paper? Yeah.
Well, Cindy and Darwin, what was the genesis of Last Ranger? It was part of an anthology.
Yeah, so
My partner and myself were collecting stories during the pandemic about how different societies were responding to it. So we were finding true stories and then sort of working with the writers in each country to get a dramatic story from that. And then David Lee, Cindy's brother, gave us this story about rhino poaching. And the light bulbs went on and we were like, yes, it's not just humans who are affected by the pandemic, it was also animals. And this felt like it was going to be a sort of crowning part of this anthology. And David had this incredibly sort of complex, big feature film. So then we worked together for about 8 months to get this script. And then we started to look for a director. And he was like, well, you know, my sister is an amazing director in South Africa. And
Yeah, so I read the script and I went, yeah, no, not so sure, hey? And rhinos, not so sure. No, I mean, obviously, living in South Africa, we are very aware of what is going on. One rhino is killed every 15 hours in South Africa. And I'm fortunate enough to go to game farms twice a year, so I know exactly what is happening. So obviously when the script came along, I jumped at it. I was really, really excited about the prospect of doing a film that had such a big impact in South Africa and hopefully around the world.
So is it based on a true story? I mean, how much fiction is in there and how much fact?
I mean, really the only fact is Tundi, the one rhino that we see in the video camera. She was one of the rhinos that was poached in 2012 and 1 out of 3 that survived that day. And she's also the rhino that we see at the end of the film with her little baby. So it really is all about hope, and it is about a community trying to get them excited, try to get them involved so that they are able to do something positive. But yeah, and I mean, it took place during COVID, and during COVID in South Africa, what happens is all the rangers, there are no tourists, so there's no income. So rangers aren't there to protect the rhinos. So that's kind of really is based loosely on a true story.
Bill, for you, I mean, what led you to that particular story? I mean, you have sort of a wide-ranging career, but mostly in more experimental films.
Yeah, I mean, it's I would say that the common denominator is the archive. I've been working with in the genre of documentary, albeit mostly archival-based documentary for the last 10, 12 years. In this case, a family friend, the journalist and Jamie Calvin, had done quite a bit of work on police oversight and social justice in Chicago, where we're both from. He's a generation older than me, but our families have been friends for years. And so I've known of him and known him more personally over the last 20 years or so. And as our careers started to dovetail in some ways, we would talk about potential projects involving, as he became more interested in surveillance cameras and police oversight using cameras. We had mentioned the possibility of collaborating on a script in the style of Rashomon, where a different camera would tell a different point of view of the same crime, depending on who owned it and where it was positioned. So we sort of had that as sort of one of these ideas that we would discuss when we'd run into each other on the street when I was visiting Chicago and he lived 2 blocks from my parents' house. He was, as you saw in the film, it makes reference to the earlier Laquan McDonald murder, and he was instrumental in breaking that case and bringing to the public's attention that there was dashboard camera footage, and that in turn made the law change that all footage of a police incident had to be uploaded and made available to the public within 60 days. And so when this case came along, he wrote about this one, the Harith Augustus murder as well, and actually made 6 videos in collaboration with Forensic Architecture out of London called 6 Durations of a Split Second, which was released in 2019. One of the pieces of footage, and really a crucial one, the dashboard cam footage that shows Hallie actually shooting Augustus, was the police said mislabeled, but for whatever reason it was not released, and eventually they found it and made it available, and this wasn't until 2022. And I think to dispel any misgivings that the public would have over that, they ended up giving Jamie like 20 hours of footage of all told. like a motherlode of a Google folder, or and Jamie wrote an epilogue, sort of incorporating this new material into his narrative of what had happened that day, and that was published in The Intercept in August of 2022. And my family reads whatever Jamie writes, and my mom had read this particular article and said, "Have you seen Jamie's new article?" I said, "No," and I took a look, and it also had YouTube links to see the footage that he was referring to, and I started downloading that stuff and seeing how it could be edited to tell a continuous narrative, even when there was overlapping time codes, and so I started playing around with the quad screen and also keeping Augustus's prone body in the frame at all times. And I showed that to Jamie, and he said, "That's really cool. Here's the Dropbox folder of all the other footage." And I started over again, now incorporating the public's reaction and, as much of the footage as I could, to tell a continuous 30-minute story. And so that's the genesis of the project.
So was it clear to you from the start that the structure would be nothing but the body cam footage?
Yeah, and not only that it was all footage that had been released by the police. I wanted to, those were the parameters, that it was the surveillance footage that was either captured by the police or taken from the private businesses that had cameras, the closed circuit TV, and that all of it had been made available to the public, and that I wouldn't add a narrator, a talking head, or music, that you could tell the story looking at the footage and then ponder why the police got off.
Did you ever wish you had something that you didn't have in that trove of footage?
It's pretty exhaustive. I don't think there's any case where there's ever been that much footage released to the public. The large part of it, of course, I didn't use. There's the police riot, which I allude to in the end text, and there's quite a bit of footage of that, though it's rather hard to tell what's going on, but it's violent. A journalist was knocked down. But in this case, the police really successfully spun this story because they took the one frame where it appears Augustus is reaching for his gun, and they put that on the nightly news 24 hours later, and everybody assumed that Augustus was a perpetrator rather than a barber, really a upstanding member of his community. And all the protests died down, and his name never was repeated again. So I thought it was an important act to sort of look at this archive, look what was made available, and understand that no matter how many cameras there are, it still depends on who owns the footage and how it's portrayed that truth can be understood.
Yeah. Well, let's go back to this end, and I'm just interested, for all of you, what were the biggest challenges you found in putting these films together? Victoria?
Good question. There are always many challenges. But I think one of the challenges was shooting on film, because it was my first time shooting on film. We shot it on 35. And, Trent had told me before, okay, the view on the monitor, it's not what you're used to. And then I was like, yeah, it's going to be fine. And then I saw the monitor, and it was like super crappy VHS image. And I was like, oh no, I was really nervous because usually I'm so on detail and really, what I see on the monitor is so is so important. So that was a challenge. Also not having the luxury to shoot everything. There is a limit to the material, which was also good because then you really have to make the decisions beforehand in the prep, and I think the focus on set, because of shooting on film, it was so the concentration and focus was everyone was a little nervous, at some point too nervous. I remember the actors coming to you.
I heard some of the actors saying, "Oh my God, I ruined the second take and it will cost so much money." I heard them talking in each other, and then I thought, okay, I'm gonna go to them and tell them that even if they ruin one take, it doesn't cost it doesn't cost more than $5 one take if it's a short take. So they were kind of reassured by then. But also the not only the shooting of film, because I mean because we made 2 short films together and we shot them digitally. I know that she's a director that doesn't do too many takes. So I was also kind of reassured by that. But also the editing was quite a challenge. I remember that Victoria came in the editing. I think we had like 70% of the film was edit, or 70% of the editing time was passed. And then she came to me and she said, "Oh my God, this is probably the worst film I ever made. And if we ever finish it, is it okay if we put it on the shelf? Because it might be really, it will ruin my career, you know."
Dramatic.
Quite dramatic. She's not that dramatic, but at that time she was quite dramatic. And I said, "Well, if it's not a good film, we put it on the shelf. It's fine." But then in the end, it turned out quite okay. But it's really a challenge how it was in the editing, right?
Yeah, and I was so glad that you were like, you were never like, "Yeah, you're right, it is a shitty film." Like you were so supportive, and also the editor. And I was like, okay, well, these people are are in the business for a little bit more time. So it really taught me to trust the process and trust the people around me.
Yeah, it was you told before, I think, if someone ever told you, "Oh, but it's going to be fine, this film is going to be nominated for an Oscar," it would save so much trouble.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, that's not possible.
That's not how life works. No.
Well, Cindy and Darwin, for you, I mean, what were the biggest challenges there?
Yeah, I think for us, really, it was shooting with 2 live rhino and a child. In 4.5 days. Yeah, so we had 2 different rhinos that we had
During the pandemic,
during the pandemic.
when people get COVID on set and we lose half a day,
Yeah, and there was a lion around somewhere.
a wild lion had to get everyone in the cat.
So we were shooting everything on open vehicles in the middle of a game reserve. So whatever we could get onto the vehicles is all the equipment we could use. We were tracking rhinos. They went out in the morning to find them, to dart them. Once they darted the rhino, we then had to try and get the rhino to fall in a place that looked like the footage on the video camera, so that you believed it was the same rhino twice on 2 different days. Then the first day when the rhino went down, it was in the wrong, we had to turn it around or something. It wasn't, feet were in the wrong direction. It didn't listen, didn't take direction. This rhino was fired after the first day.
And they needed to do some medical tests on the rhinos. So what the deal was that because they had no tourists there, they couldn't pay for these tests, and the rangers had left. So they needed some help with that. So they were going to do these tests for the first 10 minutes. And then we had 10 minutes to shoot all those.
They're only down for 20 minutes. And then the first day we were all crying. So we wasted another 5 minutes. So I think we had 5 minutes to shoot the rhino on day 1. It was crazy.
Yeah. So there was the casting, which was.
Oh, and our little girl had never acted before.
Yeah.
Right? How good was she? She was, yeah. Right? We did an interview with her. She's such a natural. She upstaged me every time on one of our big news channels. And she said, yeah, and I mean, I cried a lot. And I think I cried some really Oscar-worthy tears there. I'm like, sorry, what?
So was it a big casting net that you cast? I mean, did you read for?
I think we did. I mean,
a lot of
South
girls?
Africa doesn't have a huge cast. We don't have a lot of actors. And then they have to speak one of our 11 official languages, isiXhosa. So the pool just got a little smaller. And then we're looking for an 11-year-old girl. So our pool's like that big. And we saw 30, I think, odd tapes, and we hadn't found her. And we were all going, oh my, how are we going to make this film? And the self-tape came in, and we all just went.
Yeah, it was this incredible situation. Like, you always hear about it, but it was her neighbor was auditioning, and then she kind of just popped her head around the door and said, "Can I have a go?" And she sat down in front of this door and did that tape. And her performance in her callback was almost identical to that.
Yeah.
I mean, we saw it and we were just like, "What is this creature?" And I've been acting for 20 years and worked with quite a lot of actors, and I'm like, nobody I know can do that. And and she's just this force of nature, and her emotional accessibility is extraordinary. I mean, if you actually look at the things that she had to do in a 10-minute, we have 2 takes, and she had to, go from crying to meeting the father to the change to get the gun. I mean, it's such an acrobatic performance. And she just, as soon as she understood it, she was able to just lock in and perform. It was, it's just incredible.
So have you gotten her a ticket to the Oscars?
We are, yeah. She's
If we can get her visa. So we got a passport in 3 days because the Minister of Culture has helped us do that. And now we're just hoping that the US embassy will help.
If anyone here can help.
Yeah.
Yeah. Bill, for you, I mean, what were the biggest challenges? I mean, it feels like when you look at your film with, 2 screens or 4 screens, it feels like a puzzle that could have had, a million different ways to do it.
Well, it's certainly incredibly potent footage, and I'm sure that there'd be any number of ways of making a strong film out of it. This seemed like the logical way to tell it, also because it created this sort of sense of chaos that I think everyone on the scene, the people involved and the bystanders all felt, Of course, the biggest challenge is that I'm dealing with footage of a real death. And that was something that I struggled with, how to depict it, how to honor it somehow, how to not feel exploitative of it, And so that was largely what I wrestled with during the edit. There weren't any rhinos in my apartment or anything like that, But I felt somewhat validated by the mother of the victim who saw a screening in Chicago, and she got up and said, "Now the world can see what happened to my boy." So,
wow!
And I did get her a ticket to the Oscars.
I mean, I also feel like it must have taken some real thought because we see events happen, over in different ways from different points of view. How do you figure out how much information to show at the beginning and how much to, bring in later on? And
well, again, you take what's available and then you try to sculpt something from that. It's silent at the beginning because we don't have any audio until Holly presses his camera, allegedly. And that's what he got his 2-day penalty for because he didn't turn it on early enough. But the first piece of audio we hear, of course, is a lie. He says, "Police shots fired at the police." And before that, it's just this POD, police observation device, eye in the sky footage, which doesn't have any audio, and none of the closed circuit TV or dashboard cams have audio either. So it's all informed by the body worn cameras. So starting out with that silence, and then we have that small piece of audio, and then we go back and give a historical contextualization of where we are and how we got here. And then it continues using the body worn camera audio until the commander says, "Oh, there's a porter officer who's not on the scene who's charged with writing the report up, and he can't get a straight answer out of anyone because everyone is afraid of telling the truth on the camera, much more than telling a lie on the camera. They're afraid of telling the truth." And so to alleviate the problem, the commander says, "Will all officers turn their body-worn cameras off?" At which point they turn off, and we have that really epic moment of silence. And that, for me, is what created the narrative.
All right. And you also, you don't have a rhino, but you've got a bird that comes in at
right. So I mean, it's very close to Lake Michigan, as you can tell from the Google Map drop down. And there are seagulls all around. Clearly, those seagulls were startled by the gunshots, and but it is kind of a macabre, magical moment.
Yeah. Well, I want to talk about just the short film format and what makes it attractive to, filmmakers doing this kind of thing. And Bill, I think I'll stick with you for a minute because, a lot of your best known films are feature length. What was it about this that made you think, okay, this is a short?
I haven't counted how many films I've done, but it's over 60, and I think maybe 5 of those are features. So the best known ones, because features are better known than shorts, right? But every film should find its proper length. I think you should deal with the material that you have and figure out whether you're making a short or a feature from that. You shouldn't set out saying, I'm making a feature, I'm making a short. That's the way I deal with material first and then make a film from it. I know my colleagues here are in the narrative world, could expand from based on a script, right? So I'm usually working as I like to say sometimes, rather than trying to find a needle in a haystack, I find a needle and then I build a haystack on top of it. It's just how big that haystack has to be.
All right. So for you guys, this was envisioned as one of a series, but it was always going to be short films.
Yeah, I mean, we wanted to do this anthology of 24 films, so they needed to be short to keep, to tell us whole cinematic journey around the world. But one thing we sort of discovered through doing all this sort of development with all these different writers is, because everyone tells you 15 minutes, that's what a short film should be, that's how you get into festivals. But we realized that you're not going to connect with the characters at that length of time. And we knew with the story that to form that bond between Kusi and Leobona, you needed to have time. And that was a big challenge because you have to slowly introduce them and develop a really strong bond between these two amazing women in order to sort of sever it. And then we have another, obviously there's 3 huge emotional moments. And it was a real challenge to be able to really put these back to back. Is it going to be melodramatic? Is it going to just be too much? But we realized that we needed that time. So we just trusted it. And then it was very fortunate we had John Powell, the composer, came in the end. And his addition of the musical score with the Tanda choir from a township in South Africa called Kalisha, and there's a group of women in a village in the Eastern Cape called the Nkoko Women's Ensemble. And they do this throat singing. You might have picked that up in the back of it. And there's only 3 of them left and they're in their 80s. So we had a gentleman go into this village and record them. And when we put this all together, this was able to sort of add a female voice to the story. And there's something very transcendent, I think. And it just sort of allows you to live with this young girl in this world. So then by the time you see them having fun on the game drive, and then when the poachers turn up, it felt like we needed that amount of time. And we sort of feel like we told the story in the time it took, really.
Do you guys feel the same? That's how long the story takes?
Yeah, I think, I think it's, in a way, it's similar to Bill's approach. Maybe like you also sort of like feel, okay, is this a short story or do you need more time to tell this story? And to me at that time, it was a short story. But now I'm actually developing it's into a feature version because when I finished the film, like I think it's 22 minutes is a perfect time for this film. But when I finished it, I wasn't, done with the characters and the whole world. And I really wanted to know what's next for them and her especially, but also what their background is. So that's funny how that works. Like, it is a short film, but now we're expanding it. Yeah.
But at the same time, of course, this is a short for a reason. This is the story of the short. But of course, the story of the feature is not just going to be about a woman who finds out she might be a robot, because that's the story of a short. It's like what Bill said and Victoria saying, is like you have a story and then what's the best way to tell the story? Is that 10 minutes? Because you can create a character and you can create a wonderful story in like 3 or 4 minutes. You can do it in 20 or 30 or 100. But this story, it was for 22 minutes. It was a great format.
So that's the next thing you're going to be working on?
Yes, and there's quite some momentum now. So I have a lot of fun writing it, and I can't wait to explore more. Yeah.
Right. Cindy, now that you're an Oscar nominee, what are you doing next?
We also, looking at developing this into a feature, but in South Africa, I have a couple of other projects on the go, but it could all change. Let's see what happens.
Bill, what?
I'll just keep muddling around, finding my next piece of footage and deciding whether it's a short or a feature. This won't change my life a lot, I don't think. I'm just being real.
I think on that real note, we need to wrap up. But thank you all, and thank you.